Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming in with My Hero Academia chapter 232. Hey everyone, welcome to the chapter. So I'm just going to say very quickly, I think there's a lot of things going on in this chapter, and I didn't realize that until I read the comments on Manga Stream. People are talking about the rhetoric that's been introduced in this chapter, and I obviously have opinions about the rhetoric that other people are talking about. But yeah, for this chapter, I'm also quite tired. Maybe you noticed from the way that videos weren't being uploaded this past 2 weeks, but yes, I'm very tired. I might miss details, so this is gonna be one of those ones where if I miss something, definitely let me know if you have any ideas, because a lot of the stuff in this chapter, you know, I'm not able to kind of piece it together. My mind's going pretty slow this time around, and yeah, I think that's where we're gonna go. It also doesn't help that this week the translations between Manga Stream and Jemani's box are really bad. Well, I mean bad in terms of how different they are. Like this week, I think Manga Stream has the better translations, so you might want to consider looking at the Shonen Jump official one when it comes out on Sunday, because the translations between the two are just kind of it's aggressive. I think I have a picture up right now showing you just some of the little differences between them. Maybe we'll highlight it later. Anyway, I really want to talk about the rhetoric that people are talking about for this chapter, but before that, let's do the play-by-play of the chapter. So we begin the chapter. So the first page of the chapter, not really anything important, it's just twice setting things up. I think the real interesting part happens on page 2. Now the reason page 2 is interesting is because we have a very small conversation that occurs between this Twice clone and the Mr. Compress clone. Specifically, Mr. Compress is questioning how is the man able to duplicate himself, to which Twice says that he overcame his trauma and he didn't meet them on the way there. But the thing is, we do know that a Twice met Mr. Compress on the way there. I think it happened back in, let's see, I have it somewhere, chapter 230. Yeah, so back in chapter 230, we had that same conversation between Twice and Mr. Compress. He knows the man overcame the trauma. The reason this is important is because this kind of plays into something a little bit later with the chapter. We're trying to figure out where exactly are the limits of Twice's power. And right now, when you have that conversation occurring between the doubles, it tells you, well, the doubles are not psychically linked to the original counterpart. Well, that kind of makes sense. You wouldn't assume that. But on that note, it means that the doubles' personalities are based on what Twice... Oh, sorry. Lisp. They are based on what Twice thinks their personalities are. So this is a question of, like, how can Twice gauge someone's personality? To what degree can he gauge it? Because this whole thing with Mr. Compress says Twice can't fill in memories that he doesn't think they have, or like he hasn't personally experienced with them. It's kind of hard. So there's two ways that we can go about this. Is either Twice is the one that's totally fabricating the personality, in which case it makes a moment later a little bit more powerful, or the moment that Twice, well, is with them, their psychic imprint, their vestige, so to say, gets imprinted into Twice, and then Twice just makes that, and there's not really any input from him. So it depends. If Twice is making totally perfect personalities, then we have to say that either Twice's quirk is doing the heavy lifting, or Twice is an excellent psychologist. One of the two. Or, you know, just Twice cares about people. So that's really interesting when it comes to Twice, because this is a pretty nice little boundary that we've established here. Twice is the one constructing the personalities to some degree. So that was one of my favorite parts of the chapter. I think it's great that we have this little distinction, and I like what the author did here. Now, this chapter is all about quirks, because when you look at it, we also have Re-Destro's quirk being shown off. Here's the first page of the quirk that we get to see, and already I like the little detail. You could already see that Destro's arm was kind of inflating. It looked pretty cool. Now, as you guys know, if you were following the videos, I was saying that maybe Destro has one of those accumulation type quirks, that he just has a lot of quirks at his disposal. I am pleasantly surprised that that's not what we got. I'm pleasantly surprised that we're getting to see that he seems to have pretty much like the Naruto style expansion jutsu kind of quirk, you know, where just body parts get big. Simple, effective. I like it. I really like that we're going in with just a really good standard quirk. It just feels really good for me. Yeah, it would have been cool to have a talk about Hero Academia's continuing dependence on, continuing dependence on multiple quirks in one person. But I like that the author did this. This is a good move from the author. I enjoy it. That was pretty cool. I think with Re-Destro, honestly, given that he has such a big support company, he can come up with ways to have other functions to his quirk, to augment his quirk with other equipment, right? Like maybe he has some kind of support equipment that can light his hand on fire, and then you pretty much have like a giant, a hand of God coming down and smashing people. That would be pretty cool. So anyway, that next page, it's just Re-Destro there. He's just talking about just setting up the thing that he doesn't want any more clones getting involved, and he's going to kill Girin if it comes down to that, if more clones get involved. That was all good. Now the next page after that, it's pretty simple again. Like it's just everyone kind of reacting to the threat that Re-Destro just made. Now the most important thing there is that Twice is actually shaken by it. So when you look at the chapter, the author is really putting attention into Twice caring about Girin. Like you get it obviously when Twice is over Girin later, but he's like set it up from the beginning. Like he is very consistent with his character trait, and that's worthwhile. It's good to see that Twice, well, all the Twices even, were very against even risking Girin's life. But thanks to that, we get to have a very awesome shot of Re-Destro. Now the big thing here, aside from Re-Destro's arm, that I look and I see here is that the shirt that he is wearing, or the suit that he's wearing, is not ripping. That's pretty much like One Piece logic. One Piece, the Devil Fruits technically can affect the clothing of the wearer because Oda doesn't want to draw clothing damage. But for this one, I look at this and I'm thinking, alright, it probably means Re-Destro, with his resources, probably made a suit that has maybe rubber polymers or polymers that can expand along with his quirk so that he doesn't look like a savage, so he doesn't have a Hulk situation. So I think that's really cool. I think that's a really interesting detail. I think most likely that's what we have there. Really enjoy it. I think that was pretty awesome. Now the next page after that, honestly, not that important. It's just a page of a giant arm. You can go check it out yourself. The page after the giant arm, however, the bottom kind of panels are kind of important in just seeing how hard Twice is trying to make sure he saves Girin. Like, I personally love that. With that, we go into the whole Twice is now over top of Girin page. I'm showing right here. So this page was, you know, kind of heartwarming because like Twice is like, oh no, your hand, you can't smoke your cigarettes like you used to. And then Girin's also saying that he's a pathetic broker. I really like that interaction. I like, you know, camaraderie between the villains. I do think it's very funny that Twice is telling him not to apologize, that people who have done nothing wrong should never apologize. It's funny because Girin, by nature, is an accessory to crime. By nature, he is responsible for a lot of people getting hurt. By nature of what he does, he is responsible for putting kids in danger, right? So like, you know, when you're hearing it from Twice, it's like Twice is saying it because he's obviously biased. He obviously cares about this person. The author kind of wants to drum up that emotional support. But don't forget, these people are not good people. And this is actually pretty interesting because we go into the rest of this chapter and we start having the Re-Destro talk. And Re-Destro's just, you read it. He's like, they're playing make-believe villains. And he's talking about organization and all that. Now, when I read that panel, what I hear is that Re-Destro is establishing a distinction between him and how the League of Villains are now. And when you recall that Spinner said that the League of Villains was going to be destroyed here, when I hear the way he talks about the way that these guys operate, this to me just sounds like a setup saying, hey, this is the next step of the League of Villains evolution. They're not going to be the ragtag bunch of villains, the make-believe villains. They're going to be an organization that's actually legit. They're going to be an organization that could rival the Liberation Army. That's what I read when I read this line. It's set up. And remember, Shigaraki already has a precedence for this. Shigaraki is the kind of person, he offs his enemies, then he takes on their qualities. It happened to Shizaki pretty much. Shigaraki offed him and took his stuff and then became more. That's what Shigaraki is doing. Shigaraki is constantly growing based on who he has to deal with. That's part of his pattern. So again, you know, I'm going to be very surprised if the author does actually go forward and wipe out the villains. But when you have a conversation like this, when you have a character so clearly lining out what the villains aren't, that just tells me this is what the character wants to make the villains into. Did I say the author? That's what the author wants to make these villains into? Okay, whatever. I think I said that line, but kind of going a mile a minute here. Anyway, moving on. The next page reveals that Shigaraki's clone is still around, and then we have Re-Destro going into a little bit of a history lesson, talking about a woman that had a a woman who had a child with a superpower, talking about the time that things were still pretty bad, the kid was being bullied all the time, and then she is the person who called out, this is just my child's quirk. And I assume in the Japanese original, it's individuality. So just keep that in mind. Manga Stream had the moment, and they reminded us of the individuality term. But just remember, in Japanese, it's individuality. In English, it got switched to quirk because quirk sounded better. That's some of the little history of the translations here. Anyway, the next page is where all the rhetoric talk starts, because I'll probably miss a few little things, so I'm not going to read the whole page, but it's effectively, this is the page where we find out that this woman was killed by the anti-superpower faction. We find out that, well, we get the timeline of how the government started up and how the vigilantes came into system, and how, well, I guess the most disgusting part, that they dug up the girls' words for the campaigning. So in this page, you know, there's a lot of things going on. People take this page, they say like, well, politicians suck. How horrible is it that, hey, they took out this woman that died, this martyr, they took out her words and made it into a political slogan, that they used this to bring in people into line. Like, that's the talk about the rhetoric. We'll talk about that at the end, because that's a bigger talk, and it's just, I think people are very easily taken in whenever a charismatic villain is talking, and it's just, I feel like people forget little details that we already know. Just from, you know, reading the comments, it just kind of comes off like that. And mind you, like, my perspective is a little bit more harsh in general, so keep that in mind, because usually whenever I get harsh, I usually miss a few little details that other people who aren't as harsh might point out. But we'll come back to that page and just go to the other page that just tells us, like, this is where Re-Destro tells us that effectively Destro's mother was the one who came up with the quirk slogan, and then he just talks a little bit more about the rhetoric of superpowers and oppression and liberation and all that. Moving on, the next page, again reinforcing the distinctions between the villains and Destro, particularly, specifically Destro calling them a gang of street punks with no history to their name, and then just pretty much criticizing them for wanting destruction and not some higher purpose. Now, the thing here, when you're reading this honestly sounds like there's a bunch of villains who are having a fight over who gets the right to be a villain. This, honestly, when you read Destro pointing out no history to their name, you can tell this guy's the silver spoon of villains. This guy is the aristocracy of villains. This guy is royalty among villains. That's what it comes off at. Because he's destroying Shigaraki on the grounds of you have no history, and it's like, they don't need it. You guys are villains. You guys aren't exactly the most prestigious group in the world. And heck, Re-Destro, Shigaraki has more history than you, because Shigaraki is unfortunately connected to the king of the underworld, all for one. So, like, you know, it just really sounds like this one guy is really bitter when you're reading that line, because it's like he's making the same kind of rhetoric that you make when you have an aristocrat complaining about a commoner reaching power when an aristocrat has a right to power. It's just, it's weird, it's funny, it's just the elitism within villains. Anyway, at this page we get the setup that Shigaraki is telling Twice that the other real Shigaraki is coming, and he makes that big statement of, that's what I would do, I would destroy the building. So here's the important thing, because at the beginning of the chapter we had that bit with Twice pointing out that he is not able to update the clones properly. But then you have the Shigaraki clone saying that, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. So that tells you, well, Twice must know Shigaraki that well, and he must actively update the clones as things go along. So I really like that. You started the chapter with this note that there were limits to the boundaries of Twice's quirk. You have the implication that Twice must really know someone's psychology to make the clones work. Or, you know, just create the clones. And then you have a clone pretty much being the proof that Twice knows Shigaraki very well and given that Twice has to make a conscious effort, at least from what it seems like, to make these clones, it just builds up that Twice Shigaraki relationship. So I really like that. I think that's a very nice bookend to how the chapter started. That's a really cool little writing thing that the author did there. Absolutely love it. I think it was amazing. You know, when the author does little things like that, where there's a concise story within a very big story, or a concise message, you know, always respect that, always appreciate it. Now moving on, well actually before we go past that page, there was something that happened at the bottom of the panel with Shigaraki's hand. I'm showing you here. As you can see, there's sparks. Those look like sparks. It looks like lightning. So guys, you think those are sparks? Because if those are sparks, that gets my mind going. Is All For One's power involved in there somehow? Or is Shigaraki about to explode in terms of his potential and create, well, I don't know how to really say this. Is he going to be able to like shoot out lightning that can disintegrate things that it touches? You know, that's the first thing. Or it might just be a special effect. We know that Izuku has special effects of lightning on his powers, but they haven't really been addressed. So we'll have to keep it in mind for the future, but it might be something that pops up next chapter. Anyway, by the end of the thing, we get to the Shigaraki versus Re-Destro fight. And Re-Destro just looks like a badass. I mean, look at that face. Okay, so going back to the rhetoric. So there's things people are pointing out. People are pointing out how shitty it is that the woman's words were dragged up after she died. People pointing out that the government doesn't really work. People talking that Stain was right. People talking about lawless areas where heroes don't show up in. Like, what do people do? So there's a lot of worthwhile criticisms there. Or like a all worthwhile criticisms for the governmental system in Hero Academia. But like, I think people are being swayed a little bit too easily on this, at least from the ones that are commenting on Manga Stream. And I'm trying to remember all the comments, but I'll just like put out what I think. You know, all of Destro's pleasantries about a free system where people are free to express themselves, to like freely accept that people are just people with a few little quirks here and there. Like, that's all well and good, but we as readers already know that's not what Destro wants. Not really. We know what system they're going for. Apocrypha revealed it to us a few chapters ago. He said a system where the people with quirks, or the people with the strongest quirks, are on top. Kind of like a meritocracy, but you already see the potential for... There's already so much potential for abuse within that system. So, this man isn't going after freedom. Not really. He's going after freedom under the guise of a new system where people get to just express themselves. But it's like, no, yeah, like he still wants to rule people. He still wants people to not be free. Again, when you have a hierarchy, you're immediately limiting freedom. And this time you're limiting freedom based on what people are born with, based on what they can what they can't control. That's messed up, man. Think about that. That system, if you have a shitty quirk, you're probably going to be at the bottom rung of society. That's discrimination. That system doesn't work, and that's the system that, as we know, because Apocrypha is one of Destro's inner circle, that's kind of the implication there, that Destro also wants that, given by the virtue that they are his inner circle. The other thing is, you know, all their rhetoric doesn't matter if these people have a history, or at least in their past, of involving people that don't have a stake in the fight. Innocent people who just want to go about their lives. For me personally, you know, when it doesn't matter how good the thing sounds if you're building a world on top of the sacrifices of people that don't have to be sacrificed. So again, this is just another person who is coming up with really nice sounding rhetoric, but the way they go about achieving their goals at this point is questionable. Next up, on the note of the government brought up a woman's words posthumously. People will find that kind of shady. They're going to feel like that's not cool. This woman died and now you're using her words as a campaign speech. But here's the reality. I'm not really good with politics. I don't know how often this has happened in politics. But in human history, people being vindicated after they are dead, that's common. That's relatively common. And while it's not the same, in academia, this happens all the time. People being vindicated after like maybe 20 years of ridicule. This happens. Recently, there's talks about things in archaeology. Whenever an archaeologist brought up a particular theory or a hypothesis, Then the archaeology community just destroyed him because their establishment, they don't want to change their books. And then 20 years later, it finds out he was correct. It's actually going this way. This happens all the time. All the time, people will stand up. They will tell you about something. They will be brought down for it. They will be destroyed for it. And then you only find out that this was correct maybe after they're done. This is a consistent aspect of human society. And it's just kind of weird that people don't acknowledge that. So her having her words dug up after a long period of time, that's just normal. That's just society progressing. And man, I feel like Galileo as well. I feel it was Galileo when he was saying that the earth was in fact not the center of the universe. You think that people liked that at the time? No, I'm pretty sure the man was jailed for it. I'm pretty sure that's why so many of those esoteric people had to be hidden away, because they were going to get killed for knowing better. And that's the reality. So again, people point out like, oh, it's pretty shitty that the government took up this woman's words after she died. Like, yeah, it's pretty shitty, but that's how things go. That's just how things go. So I'm not going to hold the government to a standard that humans by far have proven that they can't hold themselves up to. So that's my thoughts on that part. Also, in terms of regulation, we also have to just take a step back and think about the regulation real quick. Like, people pointing out, like, it's pretty nasty that they are preventing people from using their quirks out in public. It's pretty nasty that people are not allowed to use their individuality, something that they are born with. Alright, I know that this is not the best way to look at it, because you could argue that engaging in this line of thought that I'm about to already devalues it. But imagine a quirk like a weapon. Yes, I know quirks should not be weapons, but they are effectively capable of more carnage than a standard weapon. Imagine you have a knife. Are you gonna take that knife and wave it around in public? No, because everyone's gonna freak the heck out. You don't do that. You're gonna be charged for disturbing the peace or being a menace, or threatening people in the streets. Just because you have a right to own a knife doesn't mean you have a right to go around waving it around everywhere or showing it off to people in the street. So why is it that people are getting so upset about quirks being regulated? You have to consider too that while this may not have been the intent of the original system, I really feel that the regulations are there specifically to protect, or I guess are there specifically to prevent the 1% of quirks. And when I say 1% of quirks, I mean the 1% of quirks that are disastrous if they are even used. I'm talking like something on the level of Eri's quirk, or even Shigaraki's quirk. If you have a free world where there's no regulation, little kids are going to be more likely to use those quirks. And can you imagine someone like Eri having her quirk activated at that moment in time? It's going to be disgusting, the destruction that thing could cause. It's going to be disgusting, the destruction that Shigaraki could cause. So that's the big thing. The regulations are largely there to protect the other people, because quirks are dangerous. And especially as we're going into the singularity of quirks, where little kids are having more and more developed quirks that don't make sense, at least by physical constraints. It's just a precaution. It's specifically there, like the whole regulation system there is there specifically to keep heroes accountable, and to also like manage the usage of quirks, because sometimes villains have really overpowered quirks. What are you going to do about that? You need someone with another overpowered quirk to fight it. It's just how things have to go for this particular society. And again, the unpredictability of quirks plays a large part in this. I know it's not cool that the 1% dictates how the 99% has to be treated. But again, the 1% of quirks that are disastrous, if they get used, they might cause massive loss of life. And another thing that we have to recall is that the Hero Academia world is not 100% zero tolerance on people using quirks. Like, the author has come out with this in little like asides in the volumes. If someone is on the bus and she drops her coins and she uses her quirk to pick it up, is she going to jail? No. You know why? Because people largely don't care if you're using your quirk for little things like that. Is the person breaking into a bank with their quirk? Alright, gotta stop them. You gotta put a stop to that. And there, again, when you consider a quirk as a weapon, it's effectively them coming into a bank with a gun and holding it up. So, ultimately, when I look at this conversation, it's like, don't get caught into this whole issue about people having their individualities just stopped. or being prevented from being expressed. People can still express their individuality however which way they want. And heck, they can still get away with using their quirk in public because the Hero Society or Hero Academia Society is largely okay with that. They're largely okay with little things, little innocent little things. But if you're using your quirk against someone, you know, that's where we start going into that really bad gray area. The fact that Izuku and his bunch didn't get locked up on zero tolerance policy for using their quirks is because nothing bad happened. That's how the Hero Society has been doing it. Hero Society has been largely more kind to people using quirks. And heck, Hero Academia's Vigilante, that manga destroys most people saying that the government is being unfair or that there is some kind of totalitarian rule over quirks, because the guys in the Vigilantes largely get away with using their quirk unregulated. Even the pro heroes aren't getting in the way of that. Why? Because the Vigilantes are worthwhile. There are people who understand how to play within the system, and it's just kind of weird when people are talking and not really realizing that, or talking with that kind of ignoring the fact that we've seen in the manga before. Hero Society is largely lenient on people using quirks, even though on the books, officially, you shouldn't be using them as a matter of public safety. So I think there's a lot more that we can cover and talk about when it comes to quirk rhetoric. But it's largely, I want to know what you guys think. What do you guys think about the quirk rhetoric? Because there's so much that can be brought up here, but I can't imagine the arguments. So if you guys come up with arguments about the quirk system, like, well, let me know down below, and maybe if I have time, like, I'll go through the comments and I'll have like really nice discussions with you guys about it. I also want to say again, the things that has happened in the past with the government, they are largely pretty shitty. I'm not going to lie about that. But so many times people are wrong, so many times people are right. People who are wrong die for it, people who are right die for it, and then eventually it finds out, oh, it turns out this guy was right. So I don't see why we should hold people up to a different standard at this point, given that that's just how things go. But yeah, guys, let me know what you thought down below, and I think that's everything. Yeah, let me know if you got any more arguments, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.